Oh, that one's got fuel.
Oh, God. It's all over me. Oh, God. Yo, what is up, YouTube? Today's video is all about this Hyundai Sonata. This is part 2 of the series, and in the first video, we removed the evap canister, and I told you a little bit about the car. The customer had a really high quote from the Hyundai dealer, and I just thought I could do a better job than they could. So in part 1 of the video, we removed the evap canister, which is sitting right over there, and along with that, a couple brake lines broke while the guy was leaving the house, so we planned on fixing his brake lines. And while I was dropping the evap canister, we found some bad fuel lines too. So I've got everything off the car right now, and we're gonna talk about what we're gonna fix today. What we're looking at here is the fuel lines. That's how rusted they are. They're not in great shape. And this goes all the way down, and this was actually all wrapped up in a plastic housing, and that's part of the reason why these go bad. Was the plastic housing holds water. I'm not sure why it broke up here, but it broke there and it was leaking, and that wasn't good. But pretty much all the lines are shot. What Hyundai did was wrap the brake lines and fuel lines in this plastic thing, and then it'll hold water, and that just not just water, it'll hold salt also, and that just eats these lines away. So we've talked to the customer about how we're gonna fix it, and I have this awesome brake flaring tool, which is part of the process I'm gonna show you today. But we're able to flare these out on the car and put some fittings on there, the brake lines and the fuel lines, and then on the other side, we're making the quick disconnect tool. The quick disconnect, which is what you see here. I've already made one off the vehicle, but that's how we're going to connect the other side also. So we got to make 2 fuel lines and connect them up here in the front of the vehicle, and we're going to make 2 brake lines, and we're going to run them from right here. We're going to run the 1 brake line to about right here where it's clean, and we're not using compression fittings. We're going to be flaring these brake lines on the car. So first thing I need to do is I'm going to remove all this plastic, get all these hanger pieces off, get all this fuel line down, so that I can start to make the fuel line bends and make it the way that we need to make it. Along with doing all of this work, I'm gonna be cleaning up these studs that hold the fuel tank straps. They broke in the last video, and I'm gonna clean them up with the tap, see if I can clean the threads and find a new nut for them so I could reuse them, because that would be really difficult for me to have to reuse them. And there's a few other things that I need to be doing while I've got the car opened up. I gotta fix this exhaust flange here. Those bolts I cut because they weren't coming out, so I gotta blow those out and fix them. So yeah, we got some work cut out for us, and I'm gonna get this all done hopefully today, so then I can put the car back together tomorrow or the next day, and everything should be great. Alright guys, so what you see me doing here is using a pipe cutter to cut the brake lines. It's pretty simple. You can just put it right on the lines, you tighten up that little threading piece and roll it around the line, and then it'll just cut a nice clean cut. It's the most efficient way to do it if you ask me. You could use a grinder, but that's not what I do. Oh, it's broke. Yeah, so I dropped the tool there, and I was trying to make a quick little joke, but first, before I go too far, I want to talk a little bit about the channel. I know I haven't posted in almost 3 weeks, and that seems a little crazy to me, but I've had a ton of other work that I've had to do other than my YouTube channel, and that was to make me money so I could live. I had to weigh out if I was able to work on videos, film, or if I worked on my full-time job. So it's peak season right now for what I do at my other position, and I just had to make some hard choices. But we're going to be in the swing of things here again. I'm going to be putting a lot more effort into my YouTube page, just because I have some really exciting things coming up. I have a car that I'm going to be working on that has actually been like a dream build to me, and I'm finally going to have the time to do it, and that's really where the channel is going to focus. Another really exciting thing that I'm going to be bringing back is the 1971 Dodge Challenger. That's my uncle's. I haven't really touched it since I did the collab with WD Detailing because of space issues and for a number of various reasons. It's a very costly project, but I really am going to dig deep into it in the near future. There's a couple exciting things I'm going to try and make YouTube videos about as I start that project. But in this case, we're working on this Hyundai Sonata, and at this point of time, I have the car finished and the customer has gotten the car back. The job was well done and he was super satisfied. What you saw me just doing there on the vise was I was making brake flares, a double bubble with my flaring tool. It's from the Eastwood company. It's a great custom automotive car shop. You get a lot of cool tools from there. And this is the flaring tool that I use that works on the vehicle. And we're also making a double bubble with this one. This tool is a master tool. It makes a ton of different flares, and the nice thing about it is you could do it while the lines are on the cars. The Eastwood tool that you saw me working with on the vise is a great tool, super easy to use and set up, but you can't make the flare on the car with that tool. You have to start with a whole new brake line. So in this case, what you're seeing me do is taking one of the lines that I cut on the vehicle, I put it in this machine, which is a little like hydraulic press, and it actually creates the flare that you need, which really is convenient because if you had to make all new lines, it's a much more stressful job. Here you go, you get a good, nice, clean look at what that flare looks like with the fitting on it. And what we'll do is take the line we made with the Eastwood tool and we'll use those fittings and it all comes together. And it's better than a compression fitting. You're really not supposed to fix brake line with compression fittings, but if you had to, I'd say I've done it in the past. A lot of people will frown upon that. But this is just a better way. If you're able to use this tool or rent one, it's worth it. It's not super difficult to use, and it does a great job making the flares. So I go ahead and do this to all the lines, all the brake lines. We make the double bubble, and then we put in the piece of line we made off the car, attach it with the fittings, and you've got yourself a nice clean line. I will say it's really difficult to use this master tool you're seeing right now with only two hands. My dad was helping me here, and it just was a lot easier to work with somebody and the tool. It's kind of heavy. We don't use it very often, so I'm not a pro with it. But when you get the hang of it, it's actually super simple. You just kind of gotta work with it a couple times, and then you'll have it down. So I would suggest if you're gonna use this master tool or something like this, you would use it off the car first a few times because it's just a lot easier when you don't have to keep cutting the line on the car if you make any mistakes. I also use that tool to make the push connect line for the fuel, which it makes those fittings perfectly. That line, that flare, it's a really difficult flare any other way, but that master tool, it is awesome. And I'm actually going to be making a video about that coming up. I'm going to drop a video just on making that push line, fuel disconnect. I made a video how to use the fuel disconnect tool, but this would be actually making the fuel disconnection line fitting. Excuse me, I'm not sure what to call it. Here in the video, you see me putting the other side of the brake line on and connecting the fitting together. I'm kind of threading it up by hand first because they're brass fittings, they strip. So I kind of thread it in with my hands, and then it's like 12 millimeter and a 10 millimeter, and you just snug these up, and there you have it. You have your line all built together. And it would be similar if you were using compression fittings here, except the compression fittings, if you're not familiar, have this little sleeve that's inside of the fittings that kind of like squeezes down when you tighten the nut. And that's just not the best way to go about it when you're doing a brake line. You could use it for other applications, but for this, I wouldn't. We have the ability to flare these, so that's what we did. And here's the back side of that line that I'm snugging up together. And this worked great. Later on, we bleed the brakes, and we find out, okay, it had a little leak here. We tighten it up, and the leak was gone. Overall, I would say the difficulty of this is maybe like a 6 or 7. It's not super difficult, but something we don't like to do is brake lines. It's just not fun. It's not something you'd like to do. The rust, the brake fluid, everything about it is just not my favorite job, but it's doable. So if you want to try to do this yourself, I'm sure you're able to do it. Just like I said before, practice off the car before you go and start cutting your lines and trying to use the tools to flare, because you could run into some problems and you don't want to have leaky brake lines. It's just not worth it. You'll have a difficult time bleeding the brakes, and I don't recommend that one bit. Here you go. You could see this is the other brake line, and this one kind of had a bend in it because the piece that was cleaner was a little bit up the line. So we made the bend in the brake line off the vehicle, made the flares, and I'm going to be connecting the fittings right here too. Just a couple quick snugs, make sure it's nice and tight. And I do thread it with my fingers for the most part before I even tighten it, because these brass fittings, they tend to strip often. And if you strip the side that's on the line, you're going to run into some problems, because then you're going to have to cut the flare off and re-flare it, because you know, if it's on there, it's already on there before the flare. You can't get the fitting off, and then your threads are stripped and it's unusable. So I would suggest you just make sure things tighten with your hands, or just very loosely tighten them before you go and try to really crank them down. And you don't even need to over tighten these, because the flaring, the double bubble is a really good flare to hold pressure. So I got this one done. Let's see. I'm really trying to snug this one up here, it looks like. And we got this last one in the front. Now, all brake lines after this are on the vehicle, which we're making good progress. You can see how many times I went around tightening that, and I'm only doing quarter turns, but again, you don't want to get crazy with this, because these brass fittings, they strip, and it's really just a pain in the neck when you do that. Alright, so now we're moving over to the fuel lines, and I'm using the same pipe cutter I use for the brake lines and the fuel lines. You just got to kind of back it out a little bit so it fits over the bigger 3/8 line. I believe that's the size of the line, or I'm not sure actually off the top of my head, but it's a standard fuel line, so they're all pretty much the same. Put the pipe cutter on there, and we're chopping it up as best as we can. It'll make a nice clean cut this way. You know, you could use a grinder, but I highly suggest you not to, because it'll be sparking, and with fuel you don't want to have any ignition or any kind of fire. It's just safer to use the pipe cutter, because it's nice and clean and you don't have to play with power tools. Here you see we gotta get this fuel line down and out. It's kind of tangled up in there. They really don't have a great design for these fuel lines, if you ask me. It's all jumbled up with the rest of the lines. Once we get it out of there, though, we can start making another line, try and mimic the bends as best as we can. So when we put it back up on the vehicle, it'll all line back up the way we need it to. We have a nice pipe bender tool that kind of makes it the way you're supposed to. Let's just toss that thing right out of the way. Alright, here we go with the other fuel line we had to cut. And the backside didn't need to be cut, because one runs to the fuel pump itself and the other one runs to the evap canister that we removed in the first video. So it's just these front lines that need to be cut. And you can see here I'm
that one got fuel.
Yeah, God. that's that opening part of the video. That's right. All that fuel was leaking out. Oh, God.
Wow.
Yeah, nothing better than fuel running down your clothes and on your jackets. There you go. Got that line off. Kind of cut that scene a little too long. We get this one untangled a little easier, I think, because the first fuel line is removed. Get this thing out of there and start bending them up so we can get the new ones in. If you guys are watching this video, I just want to say thank you so much. It means everything to me. One of the major goals I've been talking about for this YouTube channel was 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year 2024. That's an extremely high set bar, and it's going to be a stretch to reach that. But a little bit of an easier goal would be 4,000 watch hours, and we're about 1,500 watch hours into that 4,000. Since I've started posting about 5 months ago, we're at like 1,000 of the 1,500 watch hours for this year, and it's incredible. The growth has been exponential, and I love it. I really would love the 10,000 subscribers, but at the same time, I really need to get 4,000 watch hours. So if you're watching my video now, if you watch any of my videos, just let them run as long as you can. Try and watch the whole thing out for me, because that extremely helps me with the watch hours. What you just saw me doing in the video here was we were bending the fuel line with our pipe bender so that we can get it kind of situated to put back on the vehicle. And it's not going to be perfect because those bends are probably from a machine, the fuel lines initially, or the OEM ones that are on the car. So us bending them by hand, we could just do the best we can. We made them work, and I think they looked okay. But what you see me doing now in the video is getting the flaring fitting on the fuel line. And for the fuel lines, and you can leave in the comment section below if you love or hate this, but we did use compression fittings. And I know it's okay, and we discussed this with the owner. I told him that we were going to be using compression fittings because we couldn't make the proper flare we needed to make for the fuel line with the tool. He understood and was okay with it, so we went ahead and did that. But what you saw me do there was put the brass fittings on, and now I'm going to be snugging them up the exact same way I did the brake lines. You just kind of thread them on with your fingers, make sure they start so you don't strip the brass threads, and then you tighten them up with the wrenches. And this was a little bigger, so I think it was like a 15 and a 13 millimeter to tighten these up. And we'll do this for both fuel lines. We'll do the front, and that's all we needed because the back, you know, that's the push connect disconnection that is commonly used with fuel lines. And I'll make, like I said, I'm making a video for that specifically, and I'll be dropping that later this week, showing you how I made those push connect fittings and what that looks like off the car, because, you know, I didn't need to do that on the vehicle because the lines were new and we were doing it off the car. So you can see I'm going to be mounting the fuel lines back up with all the brackets that came off the Sonata. A few of them broke, but for the most part, I had enough to actually mount these back on the proper way, which was a great thing because then you know they're in the right place and you don't have to worry like if they're going to be where you need them to be when you go to put the fuel pump back on, the fuel tank I should say, because that's where the fuel pump is, and the evap canister, which that's also going to be in the next video. I'm going to show you how I reassemble all of the car. In this video, I just was specifically showing you how I made all the fuel lines and put them on the vehicle. So you can see that little bracket I was working on. Everything is extremely rusty, but shockingly enough, a lot of these things came out and didn't break. Most of the time with these Northeast cars, everything breaks. Nothing comes out so easily. And look, you saw the lines, they were completely rotten. So for the clamps or the brackets here that actually came out, I was super pleased about it, and that was a bonus to the job. But I'm putting those on so we can make the final bends we need to make, and it's held up to the car, and it'll be great because now we can kind of force the line around the way we need it to. And here you go, you see me putting the other fitting on the front initial line. And after this, really all we have to do is check over everything, fill it up with some fuel, bleed the brakes, and the lines are good to go. And I will highlight that in the later video, but this worked great. The brake lines didn't leak after we filled it up with brake fluid and bled it out. We played with the lines, we snugged them up where we needed to, no leaks. The car started almost immediately after we put fuel in it, so that's also coming in a later video. I hate to, you know, blow that for a shock factor, but yeah, the car started with no problem, and we were super happy about it. And we had no more emissions codes when we get there, so this was a job well done, and I saved the guy a ton of money because, like I said before, he was getting a quote of $2,200 at the Hyundai dealership, and that was just for the evap canister removal and replacement. The brake lines weren't broken there, and the fuel lines weren't diagnosed as bad there. But when he was at my house, he was pulling out of the driveway and the pedal went right to the floor, so you knew the brake lines were bad. And when we dropped the evap canister, we found those broken fuel lines. So I imagine he would have had to pay nearly $4,000 for this job at the dealership because they were quoting him $22 just for the evap canister, which we did for like $500-600. Super easy and simple. It did take a lot more work than we expected, but we're happy to do it because he was a family friend, and that's what life's about. So here you go, guys. That's a shot of the brake lines and the fuel lines. You can see it wrapped up all the way to the back, and I know I didn't get a great still shot of it, but this is the best we have. Look right there, you can see the new push fittings, and in the next video you'll see a better shot of those, but this is what we have for now. If you guys have watched, thank you so much. Make sure to give me a thumbs up on this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be talking to you guys soon. Catch you guys next time. Peace out.